I'm Jared. And this is the Heel to Face podcast. This upcoming weekend, the big title for title match between Impact and AEW. We talk Y2J on Austin's podcast, Austin on Y2J's podcast, and so much more in the world of professional wrestling as the Heel to Face podcast starts right now.
Fans celebrate with me from Rome to Rochester.
Bad luck seems to be my middle name. They might as well tag me up with my buddies from Syracuse.
So another edition of the Heel to Face podcast is on the air. I'm Jared. You can find me on social media at KRockJared. You can find my partner at Icebreaker21. A lot to talk about this week. Not so much in the traditional world of WWE as Monday Night Raw just seemed like, well, like last week, kind of a snore fest. We learned that Alexa's doll, or at least we learned that WWE is good at photoshopping.
Yes,
Alexa's new doll into old photos of her when she was a child, kind of making it seem like she's been doing this nonsense all along.
Of course. Why not? I mean, she seems like she's been doing it her whole life. I mean, those photos look real legit. So.
Yeah, I mean, Drew McIntyre, Bobby Lashley, that's going to happen once again. In fact, I wasn't even aware because just time flies. They've actually already fought at Backlash. Last Backlash, they fought the first time around. They fought at WrestleMania, and now they're fighting again at WrestleMania Backlash on May the 16th. But we're going to talk about some more interesting stuff in the world of professional wrestling. And one thing we didn't talk about last week, we'll start right there, and that's Y2J showed up on Stone Cold's podcast. We knew about it heading into WrestleMania weekend as it aired after night 2 of WrestleMania. A lot of people were stunned that something like this could happen. But it did happen. It was a great podcast, and it kind of opens the door to maybe a more of a working relationship. Or is it just because Chris Jericho's that special, so they let him get away with it?
Well, I think that's part of it, but I also think Stone Cold has enough pull as well. I think Stone Cold and Chris Jericho have enough of a good rapport with Vince where I think if Stone Cold would have said, hey, I want to get the Young Bucks on, I think there would have been a different response to that. And speaking of the Young Bucks, not to go too far in a tangent, but staying in character, of course, they came out and said if WWE asked them to be in the Hall of Fame many years from now, they would say no. I think that was, of course, in their
I think they've been changing their Twitter profile like on a daily basis to something
I think they
new.
have.
Yes.
But to go back to Jericho and Stone Cold, I think it's just the fact that both guys have a really good working relationship with Vince. Obviously, Stone Cold and Vince, they made a lot of money together. Chris Jericho has made a lot of money with Vince as well. But also, the way Chris Jericho has left WWE, and every single time he's done that, he's left on his own terms, but he's left on good terms. So for me, I think it was a no-brainer there. I thought it was good. I don't know if we're going to see this crossover where you're going to see, Sting. I don't think you're going to see Sting on there anytime soon.
I feel like
example.
you could see Sting. I don't know about anytime soon, but I guess the thing is,
later.
Is this podcast essentially, obviously, is a WWE centric podcast, so it has to be WWE people. Chris Jericho, you can't deny Chris Jericho. You can't deny. I mean, Sting is not to the level of Chris Jericho as an involvement in WWE.
For sure.
But yeah, you're not going to see the Young Bucks. You're not going to see Kenny Omega because they have nothing to do with WWE.
At this point.
And good for WWE to kind of recognize that. I think fans sometimes think that there is more of a tenuous relationship. If you leave WWE, you're like banished, never to come back. But as we've learned before, Vince McMahon is willing to do business with just about anybody. Eric Bischoff, Ultimate Warrior, Hulk Hogan. So,
I mean, honestly, he's done it to many wrestlers over the years. It goes across the board. If Vince can see enough dollar signs in you, he's going to put that old stuff aside and say, let's make some money together. Because at the end of the day, it's a business. If you can make money, it doesn't matter if you guys are good friends. You don't have to go after the show and have beers together. If you're cool, you're cool. You want to make some money, let's do it.
It definitely has to be special people. And that's, I guess, one of the issues with any of this stuff in WWE. You can even tie it back to the A&E biography that debuted this week with Stone Cold Steve Austin, the re-release of a biography, because we'll talk about that in a minute, about what I mean by re-release. But staying with the Austin and Y2J thing, it's something you're going to let Y2J do. It's not something you're essentially going to let, like I said, anybody do. I don't think if Zack Ryder necessarily wanted to come in and do the Stone Cold podcast, they'd be down for that right now. Well, he doesn't have that kind of pull.
Well, yeah, he definitely doesn't have that kind of pull. He's not a megastar like Chris Jericho is. Chris Jericho is one of those people where he's done it in you name the major promotion. Essentially, I don't consider Impact major, but I consider, AEW, WWE, New Japan, those are the three big guns.
WCW. Which is also owned by WWE. Yes. So essentially, everything he's done, has been, except for, about a year's time, he's been in AEW.
No offense to Zack Ryder, and this is not a slight to Zack Ryder, but Zack Ryder is just not. He's just not on that level. It's not a bad thing. He's still in the business. He's still doing things, but he's not Chris freaking Jericho. There is not too many people on earth that do what Chris Jericho has done. I don't know. I can't name anybody that's a mega rock star and a fantastic Hall of Fame caliber wrestler, which he will be a Hall of Fame wrestler. How many people can say they've done that? I can't name any.
And to not the extent of Chris Jericho, but yeah, I feel like, again, when you've had such an impact, for example, I saw Bubba Ray Dudley and Devon when the Dudley Boys got inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. He was still in a working relationship with the Ring of Honor at that time. He actually showed up at the Ring of Honor show the next night after he was inducted into the Hall of Fame the night before. I don't want to say that he was like really in bed with the Ring of Honor, like a synonymous, like Chris Jericho was with AEW, but he was in enough of like he was kind of under contract or working with another company at the exact same time. But as long as both parties agreed, which the smaller party, Ring of Honor in this case, obviously is going to be okay with Bubba Ray Dudley, who's the name they bring in, going and doing one of these things on a night off. It brings, it helps them out. And then WWE says, listen, you just have to sometimes acknowledge that there are other wrestling companies out there. It's not the end of the world. And one thing about acknowledging that is I think it's going to get better once Vince McMahon is out of the picture. So let's kind of move on to the A&E biography, and we talk about with people being able to do whatever they want. Well, Stone Cold Steve Austin was one of those people that kind of got to do whatever they want, as you learned. I mean, not learned, but we learned again in this A&E biography.
We've all known this for years.
But if you watch the biography, they pretty much make it out like when a special talent comes along, we let them stun the boss. We let them go and do whatever they want. And there's probably tons of talent out there that's watching that biography.
And it's like,
you never let me be creative. If I would have come out and just said what I wanted to say on the microphone at King of the Ring 96, I would have been fired. AKA, look what happened to Triple H at the exact same time.
Yeah.
Triple H goes out and does something that kind of is frowned upon, and they literally punish him.
Then they
Austin
open the door.
comes out and says, Austin 316 just whooped your ass, and they're like, let's go with it.
And here's the thing too, like that whole thing with Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and you got
Scott Hall and
Kevin Nash. You got, so you saw them kind of open that door. There's some infamous video. The footage isn't really great, but you can see the infamous open. They open the door to the real side. The real friendships of the business. And back in those days, you didn't do that. So I do thank them for doing that, because who knows what would have happened, because Triple H was supposed to win King of Ring that year, not Stone Cold Steve Austin. And as we know, the Austin 316 era just kicked the door just kicked wide open after that night.
And I guess I don't understand too, because Vince McMahon clearly puts on these biographies, and he sees whether it be Mick Foley, whether it be The Rock, whether it be Stone Cold Steve Austin, and he sees that the business was at a high point at that time. And even though he sees that then, he still today makes everybody pretty much read a word for word scripted promo. So I don't understand. You obviously saw what worked. You're even on these documentaries saying that, if it wasn't for The Rock or Stone Cold or Mick Foley or Big Show or any of these people kind of going off script and throwing things against the wall, who knows where WWF would have been. And then at the same time, you're telling Rhea Ripley, read off this cue card.
Yeah, to me, again, it goes to this whole pull thing with Vince. If Vince trusts you enough, he's going to let you do what you want, so to speak. And that's what happens. Unfortunately, there's a short leash with, let's just say 98% of most superstars past and present. And that's unfortunate. I think what you should do is, and this is why I love NXT, let these superstars freelance a little bit, on NXT. Let's see if they got it. Let's see if they can come up with things on the fly where it doesn't look like total crap. And then if they have it, then you bring it up to the main roster, and then Vince says, "Okay, you've done it in NXT. Go ahead, you can do it on Raw."
Well, the problem is if you want to talk about that, they are doing it in NXT, and then they get to the main roster.
But obviously they're not good enough.
And they're switching the game up on them. They're being run under by Triple H and Shawn Michaels, who are giving them more leeway, who are helping the characters get over. Then they make it to the main roster, and they're like, shut right down. Triple H is not there anymore. Shawn Michaels isn't there anymore. They got to answer to 25 different writers versus maybe just Triple H. And they're shut right down, and it doesn't work.
Well, here's the issue. There have been some superstars that can be more like themselves that are from NXT up to the main roster. I think I'll throw one name out there in particular, and I think you can agree. I think it's his character 110% is Riddle. I think Riddle to me, he, like the way he is, I don't think it's all a show. I think he's just that cool bro, like chill, this kind of like a laid back dude. Like I think you're getting to see the real Matthew Riddle, on the show with a little bit of WWE kind of, brushing the edges off a little bit, like, keeping it somewhat tight. But I think that's him. RVD, when we watched the RVD segment with Riddle and Khali, that to me, that was, and we talked about it, that was fun because you got to see RVD and Riddle. Who didn't want to see those two guys? They got the same kind of laid back mentality. So I think Vince, it's harder for Vince to give some of these talent, kind of that, like, yeah, go ahead, go off script, go ahead. Triple H and Shawn, I think they see it like, okay, how are we going to know how good these guys are, or females, ladies and guys, if you don't let them, just let them, sink or swim, throw them out there and let them do their thing.
I guess the problem, though, maybe, too, is that you also don't have them working with some of the best talent. Now, when Shinsuke came up, you immediately had him win the Royal Rumble. You immediately had him face AJ Styles. Great. He's on a rocket ship. And then you flounder him down to the joke, not high level. And I'm not saying he necessarily has to always be at high level, but in NXT, he wasn't. I guess there's nobody in NXT that's the comedic relief for the most part. Everybody is a hard hitter. Well, everybody down.
I would disagree. Breezango is definitely.
Okay, correct. Yeah, Breezango, Tyler Breeze, and Fandango.
Yeah. They're definitely comedic
relief.
They
are definitely the comedic relief, but I'm just saying, like, Shinsuke,
from a tag team
you go from like a world champion and then you're thrown in like the New Day situation where you're in the Andre the Giant Battle Royal and you're just one of many names. When in NXT you were the cream of the crop.
You were the name.
I mean, who's to say that if Finn Balor wasn't on the main roster, who's to say he would have still been not at WrestleMania? He would have actually not been on NXT. He would have been at WrestleMania. He would have been the Andre the Giant Battle Royal on SmackDown.
Let's be honest. Who knows if he'd still be in WWE? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
He was. Let's be honest. He was floundering in on the main, on Raw and SmackDown. But here's the thing. He didn't take his ball and go to NXT. He said, I think he saw the writing on the wall, and he's like, I can do more in NXT, not only from his perspective, like a character perspective, but also when you attach Finn Balor or some of these young Cameron Grimes of the world, like guys like that, Kyle O'Reilly, you attach Finn Balor to those names, you're giving those guys instant stock. You're giving those guys the namesake that they need. Oh my God, I can compete against Finn Balor. I can beat Finn Balor. That only makes those other guys better. So Finn Balor's a very intelligent guy. So if he can get over better in NXT and also get other people over, why the hell wouldn't you do it? He's doing what's best for the business.
And it's funny that you bring up Finn Balor because Finn Balor he went from the Demon King gimmick and he went over to NXT where he's more just Finn Balor the Prince. And one thing about that is people say, oh, should you be the Demon King? And it's like, no, that doesn't really work in NXT because in NXT, it's more of that realism product. It's more of that real names, that Stone Cold Steve Austin, Black Trunks, Black Boots, myself,
sure,
not the nonsense cartoon character. Obviously, you have Seth Rollins of the world, up at the main roster doing that stuff. But down in NXT, it's all people doing that, I feel, for the most part. You don't have a ton of gimmicks. You have straight up Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly, Roderick Strong, Finn Balor, Karrion Kross. I feel like they are being more of themselves. They're not having the outlandish trunks and the outlandish boots.
And I would put Cameron Grimes on that level as well. I think Cameron Grimes, this whole new gimmick where he's a stock market guru. He's almost like a hillbilly JBL. I think it's fantastic.
Dexter Loomis again, the same.
Love Loomis. These are some really cool characters, and I got to get your thoughts on Dexter Loomis and Indy Hartwell. What do you think there? Do you think that relationship? I think that's a little odd, but I'm waiting. I'm kind of feeling that out, seeing what happens. But I feel it really interesting to see Dexter Loomis maybe coming out of his
shell,
so to speak.
Yeah, he's got that G.I. Joe look to him,
100%,
and acts the same way, but. It's kind of what I said a few minutes ago leading into the Austin podcast where I said re-release. What I mean by re-release is, I don't know if you know this at home, but I feel like we know a lot about Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Of course we do.
Then when they came out with the A&E biography, this wasn't the same as when they came out with something that we had no idea. Like, remember when WWE Network first started and we saw some original biographies and original documentaries, and it kind of opened our eyes to a lot of things.
Sure, yeah.
I feel in 2021, there's really not much for us to learn about Stone Cold Steve Austin.
We know it.
There's really not much to learn about any of the people that are on the line of biography. And when I say by re-releases, if you don't remember, all these people had biographies from A&E like 10, 20 years ago. On the YouTube channel right now, they're actually re-releasing on YouTube their original biographies that A&E did. Remember when A&E biography was like a big show in like 1999, 2000, and they did a biography on everybody. They had that one narrator voiceover.
Yes.
I think it was the same guy who did like Behind the Music. But they've done these biographies before. We learned about, and I get it. That was more of the kayfabe era where you could say a little bit about Stone Cold, but all your interviews were still like approved from WWE. You couldn't get too much footage from WWE kind of thing. And now it's like you do it with the blessing of WWE. Now you have The Undertaker straight up sitting down for an interview, not just catching him off guard real quick or something like that.
Yeah.
So I get it, but why I bring this up is I kind of wonder, and I've wondered this about the Hall of Fame. I wonder this about the network itself. I just wonder how long and how much content can we keep getting out of these same names?
I mean, that's the issue. I mean, there's going to come a time where the well's going to run dry, so to speak.
I feel like we've kind of got to that point now.
We're getting close. If we're not there, we're close.
I mean, we're not at a point yet where I'm interested in seeing a Drew McIntyre or Roman Reigns biography. We need to let that breathe. But
we also need to get them to be more legendary, so to speak. I mean, the wrestlers you just named, Stone Cold, Undertaker, they're legends. They're literally legends. There's non-wrestling fans that know Undertaker and they know Stone Cold. How many non-wrestling fans, if you said, hey, do you know who Drew McIntyre is? They'd be like, who? You know what I mean?
My question is, between 2001 and 2009, let's say, what people appeared in that time frame? Because we already know the people who appeared before. We've already got the Hogan, the Stone Cold, the Mick Foley, the Rock. We've seen all their documentaries. Sure. I know their upbringings. I've read their book. Even when I was reading like the Rock's book in 7th grade, I was still like, I knew a lot of this stuff. And that's like 1999. I'm reading that book.
I did the same thing with Mick Foley's book back in the day.
I mean, and that was, and I would say
circa like 2001, I think it was.
Yeah, the Have a Nice Day.
Yes, I still have the book.
All those books. Those books were literally my favorite books. Still, the Mick Foley original book, Have a Nice Day.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a book.
Has some cool pictures in there,
and
too.
what's awesome is that all came obviously before the network. So
Absolutely.
You're learning. That was when you were learning stuff. But now that we've read those books, and we've seen those biographies, and we've seen the docs, and we've seen the WWE 24s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we've seen the Dark Side of the Rings, and we've seen all this kind of stuff.
Yes.
We know about those guys. So who, I guess, between 2001 and 2009 that appeared only in those times, is worthy of getting a biography, a documentary, that we don't necessarily...
only so like they never wrestled again in 09, after 09?
Well, if they're still currently wrestling, it's tough because, again, they're still wrestling.
Because I can name two guys off the top. You got John Cena, Randy Orton.
Yes, and I say Randy Orton, he's
still going.
He's there. John Cena's probably on that list. It's just, that's the issue. Like, who kind of is
Brock Lesnar?
Brock Lesnar. You could do. It's just tough because we want to keep just going back to the 90s names over and over again.
You got to find. I mean, now they have a Miz specials coming out this weekend. So I mean, I'm interested in the Miz. I'm a big fan of what he does. Is he? Let me ask you this. I'm going to pose this question to you. Is he a legend?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I would say. I don't know he's up there with the Stone Colds of the world, but I mean, he's been in enough championship matches. He's been around long enough. Would you put him in? I'm not saying from a. I'd put him in the Big Show category.
Okay. How about would you put him not from an in-ring perspective, but like just the overall body of work, just different aspects of it, like a British Bulldog? Like British Bulldog was in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah,
Would you put him in that level?
I'd put him in that level. British Bulldog, Big Show.
And obviously they were different. Obviously there's a lot of differences, but I'm saying like the overall work makes them a good Hall of Fame.
A good example for like the Big Show is he had runs where he was main eventing, but you can't. I don't really know of a time where if the Big Show's name was on the marquee, that was selling the event.
It was if he was in WCW.
Even so, I mean,
in his peak in WCW,
but in WWF,
when he was
WWE, WWF, well, they had so many names, it's hard to tell because he was also always working with Hogan. Well, so it's hard to really tell if it was him or if it was him and Hogan.
I mean, they put the heavyweight bout on Giant pretty quick. I think it was 6 or 7 months.
No, that is true. I guess my thing is like we know that Stone Cold Steve Austin, we know The Rock. I'm trying to think. The Undertaker. Those guys were on a marquee. That's the only name you had to say. If you said a WWF show is coming to town featuring the Big Show and no other names, is that enough? And that's why
If it
I put,
was younger prime Big Show, yes.
that's why I put the Miz in the Big Show category, because the Miz is the same way. Yes, he's been in the main event. Yes, he's main evented a WrestleMania, but was he main eventing, or was the match involved with John Cena?
Sure.
And
Okay.
frankly, still a lot of people even said he shouldn't have been in that main event.
I'll give you that. I think the thing that I love about Miz is he's a constant in WWE.
Yeah, well, he's a
constant.
workhorse. He's a constant. He doesn't go away, and that's why he's achieved the status he has.
And
he's a company man.
And you know what? And the way the character he plays, which, and I've said it before on other shows, that he kind of comes off as like this douchey, like I'm better than you kind of guy. He's like to me, he's like MJF before MJF, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like that's what he is. And at this point, Miz is still better than MJF at this point. And I know you're going to get some heat for that one because MJF cuts fantastic promos, which we did see this past week. But still, Miz did it first. And Miz has done it all this time. Miz has never been the A+, A tier John Cena, Roman Reigns, Undertaker. He's never been that guy, but he's always been so damn consistent where he's to me, he's always the in-between mid-card and the top of the card, the main event. He's always in that middle, and he's always done a hell of a job. He's one of the best promos in the business the last decade plus. So overall, I think his body of work speaks for itself.
One thing we never got to talk about last week with all the WrestleMania talk that we had, it's hard to believe that it's been almost 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks since WrestleMania, but one of the issues I wanted to bring to your attention that, I kind of thought of at WrestleMania and that you probably obviously saw yourself. And one of the things that kind of piqued my eye to this in the future, and then obviously people were bringing it up, was the fact that when they did the Stone Cold Steve Austin commercial for Dallas, Texas, WrestleMania next year, it said April 2022. Now, obviously, when they made the big announcement that it was going to be there months ago, there was a specific date tied to that, and now it just says April 2022. Sure. Kind of opening the door to what many people think, and while it's not planned, might be 2 nights. Yep. So the question I bring to you is, a lot of people really loved 2 nights. It's weird because we didn't hear about it at 36. I think because 36 was just so weird and just so much of like, let's just get that out of our system. But now this year that it's felt more of a real WrestleMania and that it was 2 nights, a lot of people had a lot of things to say, and it was mostly positive about 2 nights. What is your opinion about WrestleMania? Should it be 2 nights?
It should not be 2 nights. I think it should be, I think they should go back to the traditional 1 night on Sunday. But, and we've talked about this off the air and on the air, I think NXT should have like a WrestleMania takeover on Saturday night. So in a way, it's a night 1, night 2, but it's also you're differentiating the main roster and the NXT side of it. So for me, WWE Raw SmackDown side, Sunday night. You got the NXT side of it, Saturday night. So I guess in a way it's a 2-night version, but it's a different 2-night version.
And that's the thing, and that's why I'm against being 2 nights, because a lot of people are seeming to forget that this year is different than other years. Last year was different than other years as well. People are like, oh, 2 nights, that was great. They are forgetting that there would normally be a lot of stuff to accompany WrestleMania that didn't accompany WrestleMania this year. They're forgetting that NXT would be a normal event in front of a crowd on the weekend portion. They're forgetting that the Hall of Fame isn't something that's going to air or shouldn't air on Tuesday night, almost a full week before WrestleMania. It shouldn't. I don't want them to do that. If they made it 2 nights, it might, and then that would obviously hurt it even more because, there's nobody in town. Nobody goes to WrestleMania. Sure, some do make it a week long, but personally, I don't want it to be a week long because, I just don't. I like the format of like a 4-day weekend. I think it should stay like that. Listen, if you got money, if you're one of these WWE diehards and you make it a week long and you go to Universal Studios and all the other stuff before, that's great. Good for you.
Yeah, kudos.
But for the WrestleMania weekend, it should be WrestleMania weekend. It should be Thursday, the early birds arrive, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, the lucky stay, and then it's over with.
Yeah, then you're on the road, back home on Tuesday.
Yes. So, or some are home on Monday, some are home on Tuesday.
Sure.
But either way, it's over for everybody by then. And I think the issue too with having it 2 nights, obviously then you move NXT, you move the Hall of Fame, you make this much longer than other companies that want to come in. I know WWE doesn't care. I do personally. I like the mix. I like the Ring of Honors. I like the New Japans. I like the Indies having time to work. And essentially they don't have time to work. This year there was a bunch of Indies that actually had to work at the same time as WrestleMania night number 1,
which is not
to fit themselves in. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Perfect style for me. You got Friday night. Instead of doing SmackDown, make it a Hall of Fame special.
Yes.
Saturday, NXT. And then you got WrestleMania on Sunday. And you got Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So if you want these other indie promotions or the Ring of Honors, the AEWs, New Japans of the world, You got Monday through Thursday to figure it out.
Well, and you also have, you can like Ring of Honor can go up against the Hall of Fame because those are two different kinds of crowds.
Sure.
Some people are WWE fans, but they're like, I don't want to hear people talk. I want to go watch
some wrestling. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to go. And I've met those people. I've met people who skip out on the Hall of Fame to go watch some wrestling, and I met people like myself who skip out on some wrestling to go watch some Hall of Fame. And
everybody's a little different with that.
We all do our thing, but we're all at WrestleMania on Sunday night.
You got it.
The one issue also with being a 2-night WrestleMania is if you are going to be a 2-night WrestleMania, that assures that WrestleMania is going to be a long event.
Sure.
If you started at 6 or 7 o'clock on Sunday night and you essentially say, this year we only got 4 hours worth of content, so it's a 4-hour show. Maybe this year we got 5 hours worth of content, so it's a 5-hour show. But if you are putting on 2 nights like they did this year, you are have to book 6 hours worth of content. There is no shortage. You have to make it 6 hours. You have to put things on the show that might not necessarily be on the show because you can't make, especially if people are paying individual night prices, like one person's going one night and not the other night. You got to make them both at least 3 hours like you did this year. And that might be fine. That might work out sometimes. But if you have to do that, like WWE, WrestleMania went till 12:30 a couple years ago at MetLife Stadium. But if it went to 11:30 and was cut an hour short and they took some matches off the card, no one would have complained. Sure, if you make it a 2-night show and one night only goes till 9:30 and it starts at 8 o'clock, that you can't do that. You have to make both shows at least 3 hours long.
Yep, 3 hours is good.
So by meaning the 3, so you literally have to make WrestleMania has to be 6 hours. It can't be any shorter than, it's like Monday Night Raw. You can't just go off the air at 10:20 because you're out of stuff. Your obligation to the USA Network is you're on the air at 11 o'clock. Yep. You got to put something in there. So their obligation to the fans in attendance is if you're buying a ticket, we got to put on a 3-hour show. That's just a minimum. So 3 hours.
Yeah, 3 hours
nice.
is good. Yeah, 3 hours is good. I mean,
but that would be annoying.
You don't
to
want to go
know
more
that
than
they
4.
have to book 6. I don't like 6 total. I don't want a 6-hour one-night WrestleMania. Don't get me wrong. But I will say I think they should bring it down to 4.5, 5 hours for sure. Absolutely. I think WrestleMania should have no pre-show when it comes to matches. The show should start at 6 o'clock. And then
6.
I think 6. Why not 6?
Here's what I would do. For me, 7 to 11 is where I'm at.
Well, here's the thing. Again, you can play with that. Let's say you do got a long WrestleMania this year. Start it at 6, and move it, and then say, okay, we're going to go to 11. But let's say you're a little thin, maybe like you were this year, and thought, oh, we don't got 4 hours each night. We'll start it at 7 and go to 11.
I think 7 to 11 is a hot pocket.
That gives you time to play with one night. If it's a 4.5-hour show or a 6.5-hour show, the idea is you can stop at any point in between. As soon as you put on 4.5 hours, everything else is a bonus. Everything else is we're getting more than our money's worth. If you put on, but with 2-night WrestleMania, you got to put on 6 hours. Anything short of that is I want a refund.
Here's what I'll tell you. I would say this. Perfect format for me on Saturday and Sunday. So NXT would be 7 to 10. Mm-hmm. And then WrestleMania is either 7 to 11 or, like you said, maybe 6 to 10 and change. However it comes out to be. Mm-hmm. So 4 hours and 3 hours. So to me, 7 hours of programming is fine. Plus, we'll throw in an extra 3 hours for Hall of Fame. So there's 10 hours spread over 3 days, which is fine. I don't, like you said, I don't need 6 hours. This past WrestleMania was exhausting as a fan because you want to watch it all, but you're like, do I got to watch it all? It gets
it does
exhausting.
take away from the specialness, obviously. I think one of the aspects they did last year and they did again this year is you have like a repeat opening video package. They had the same video package. Yes. So you've already, like when I was going there night number 2, and I've never felt this before walking into a WrestleMania, you felt like you're going to like a baseball game that you go to every night. You felt like you were just, oh, here we are again, like doing this like work.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, I liked WrestleMania, but the issue was night 1 was the excitement. What does the stage look like? What does the crowd look like? What's that opening video
night
package?
Night 2, you're already there. You've already seen it.
Night 2, we've already seen the flyover. Sure. We already heard America the Beautiful. We've already seen the video package. You know what I mean? We've already know exactly how the show rundown is going to go.
And by the way, I don't know if you heard, but it wasn't 25,000 that was actually there.
Yes, they're reporting that more close to 20,000 each night. 18, I think, one
000.
Night and 20,000 the next night or something.
No, it was
18.
It was 17 and change, so almost 18.
Now, is this paid attendance or people there?
I didn't get the confirmation on it. It was just according to Raymond James stadium officials is what
I will say that it looked as full. It looked more full than I thought it. That's one thing. I've gone to a few of these social distancing events where and you think it's going to look just empty. you look at, because when I buy the tickets, I see there's only 4 people sitting in my row, and I'm like, what is this going to look like? Because you can see the sections and you can see the seats, but when you get there, it doesn't look as bad.
It didn't look bad on TV.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm
looks
saying.
halfway decent.
So it was kind of strange when I was there. I actually brought it up to the attention of the people I was with. Like, this doesn't feel like only 18 to 25,000.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because here at the Carrier Dome in Syracuse basketball, obviously we know that they draw, on occasion of 25 to 35,000 people for a game.
Absolutely.
And I can tell you, being in that stadium, it didn't feel like it felt like bigger than those.
Yeah,
it didn't feel like I'm like, this is less than a basketball game.
Sure.
No, I mean, the football stadium had people all the way around.
Let's not get it twisted. 18,000 is still nice.
I know,
considering
but,
where we're at in this.
And then they framed it well. They framed it well. It didn't look empty. Everything they did.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm against the 2-night WrestleMania. I think it needs to be special. It needs to be one night. And then that gives you time to play with. Like I said, you can throw matches on the pre-show if you can't fit them on the main card. You can shrink the show up. You can expand the show.
I do want to go back to something real quick, not to cut you off. I want to swing back because I know we were talking. I know we were on Stone Cold and Jericho on Stone Cold show. I got to get your quick thoughts because I know we teased it a little bit. How did you like Jericho having Stone Cold as a guest? Did you listen?
I actually didn't listen to Stone Cold on Jericho's podcast.
Fantastic, by the way. It's a highly recommend. It's cool because they essentially flipped the role.
Started asking each other about each other's career.
It was good, and I would recommend it. I mean, Chris Jericho was very entertaining, anyways. So if you've seen the Stone Cold interviewing Jericho, which most people have, it's right after WrestleMania. I highly recommend going to Talk Is Jericho and going and listening to him interview Stone Cold. It's cool because they're legit friends outside of the business. So
well, I mean, a lot of these people are, especially from certain generations.
Oh, absolutely, and you get to hear some stories or just the back and forth. It's like you're a fly on the wall listening to these guys. You're almost like sitting there drinking beers with them, listening to them talk. It was absolutely fantastic. I mean, I don't want to I don't want to kind of
I did like this story on the Broken Skull session where Chris Jericho was talking about having to get on a flight and they pretty much put him in Mexican jail because Haku came up, Tonga Kid, and attacked the security guards. That was a good. I mean, Jericho had all sorts of good stories, but look, he's lived literally the best life, not just in wrestling, but I mean, period.
In general, he goes.
I don't know how much money Chris Jericho has, and frankly, I don't even care.
He's had a great life.
Yeah.
He's done it all.
I would never. Chris Jericho is not one of those people that you have to Google their net worth to see or want to know how good they're living.
He's made a pretty damn good fortune. Though,
yes,
for sure.
But essentially, nothing about his financial gains has ever been I want to be Chris Jericho because he's rich. There's other people you want to be Bill Gates because he's rich. You want to be Jeff Bezos because he's rich. But Chris Jericho, you could essentially say he's making the same money as you or me, and I would still be that's awesome.
He's done it all. He's done it all.
Yes.
Undisputed champion. And he's sold out, he's been on tours across the world with Fozzy. And, if you go to his singles, millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of hits on YouTube, for example.
He's main evented sports arenas.
Yes.
And then he's headlined landmark concert venues.
And he's had his own cruise, for God's sake.
Yes.
He had the Jericho cruise too, where he performed. He performed there, and he also had wrestling. They had this. It's almost like a carnival cruise, the Jericho cruise that we talked about. I think it was 3 years ago. It's been a while. But he did stuff like that. Only Jericho can do that stuff. Jericho's awesome. Yes,
Triple H has done a lot of stuff, and The Undertaker's done a lot of stuff. But there's lots of venues that wrestling has never been. There's lots of prestigious music venues that WWF and WWE has obviously never dealt their hand in. Let's say, New York City, for example. He's headlined Madison Square Garden, but then he's also got to play some historic, legendary music clubs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Awesome.
Who gets to say that they've played the Whiskey A Go-Go on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood, California, and main evented the Staples Center?
Two different types of entertainment too.
Yes.
That's the thing. I mean, yes, The Rock is box office. He's the most. He makes the most money in Hollywood. But I would put Chris Jericho up there, not from a financial perspective, but just the life experiences. I mean, imagine being those guys. That's pretty awesome.
Yes, you get to main event in front of 20,000 wrestling fans, and then you get to be a rock star touring with Ozzy Osbourne and Rob Zombie and all these other people.
How awesome is that?
Yeah.
That's the life, man.
It truly is the life. So let's move on to this weekend's Impact Rebellion pay-per-view. I never thought that we would see it at Impact. But AEW, they're letting it happen at the Impact Rebellion pay-per-view. Title for title, Rich Swann, Kenny Omega, Mauro Ranallo is going to be on the call.
Wow, good stuff. Mauro.
On the undercard of that, we get the guy we talked about earlier, Matt Cardona, also known as Zack Ryder in WWE, against Brian Myers, also known as Kurt Hawkins in WWE. They're going one-on-one. You got Deanna Purrazzo on the card. You got Eric Young on the card. But obviously the main event everyone's talking about, what is going to sell even one of these pay-per-view buys, unless you're a real hardcore wrestling fan, then good for you. You're probably not listening to our podcast, or if maybe you are, because you're so hardcore you listen to everybody's podcast.
You should be listening.
But
that's the fact. You should be listening.
But this is going to be sold to most fans by Rich Swann versus Kenny Omega, title for title. Sure. Who do you see walking out of Impact Rebellion as the unified Impact and AEW champion? Are you fine with the unification? What is your opinion on all this?
I'm okay with it. I think it's cool because the two different promotions are working together. The only thing I would say is the predictable answer is Kenny Omega. But what I want to see is I want to see Rich Swann, because nobody's seeing it coming. Everybody thinks Kenny Omega's got this in the bag, but nobody's talking about Rich Swann. He's kind of like the forgotten champion.
Yeah.
So for me,
and if he wins the championship, that could easily just move him into the AEW pay-per-view realm. He wins the championship. Next thing you know, it's him versus Kenny Omega versus Jon Moxley. They're going to triple threat at Double or Nothing or something.
For the wrestling business, Kenny Omega can take the L, and it's fine because it's Kenny Omega. Rich Swann needs this win more than Kenny Omega. Let's be honest. I think he does. And if they book this the right way, which I don't know if they're going to. I mean, you're gonna have to watch just like I am and find out. But I think Rich Swann needs this win.
I'm very curious how they're going to book this going forward, with the sense of obviously one champion is going to be on one show. So essentially, if Kenny Omega does win the belt, then Impact Wrestling is essentially without a world champion, and it's already a hard enough show to watch for the casual wrestling fan.
Sure,
So now we don't even have a world champion in this promotion,
unless he's going to be pulling double duty.
I mean, I imagine he'll be doing double duty to an extent, but more like Brock Lesnar style. I don't see him on a weekly basis getting in tag team matches.
Let's be honest. I mean, Rich Swann would be the guy that would benefit from. He needs the benefit from this. He needs the win. I don't think him losing is a good idea for the business. That's just my opinion on it.
So as we wrap up, just a few things I want to talk about, and then we'll have to save some stuff for next week. SummerSlam, looking at venues in Texas and in Arizona, outdoors.
Love it.
Obviously, you'd probably prefer Texas. You're a big Texas fan guy.
I'm a big fan of
But what about the idea that they're talking about returning to your favorite place, Saudi Arabia, before the year is out?
I'm going to give it a big, if you're watching on YouTube, a big thumbs down. If you're listening,
and I'm going to give that a big thumbs up. And the reason I'm giving it a thumbs up is because of the fact that why would we be against them performing anywhere in front of crowds? They're not taking right now.
Yeah, but we know how these shows go. They're awful. It's like, all right, we're bringing Goldberg back for one of his two matches a year.
If WWE is planning or even has the thought of returning to Saudi Arabia before the end of the year, what that tells me is that they plan on returning to crowds here in the United States and North America as well. That's all I'm saying.
I hope you're right, because we need some fans in these venues.
So that's what I'm saying. If it's not like an alternative, it's not a one or the other.
But I don't want to see Goldberg and maybe Undertaker comes back because they're paying so much money. Let's stop doing that. I don't need to see that. Like, I'm done with the whole Saudi Arabia, and I have nothing against it. It's like if you want to go perform there, I have no problem with it. But let's stop doing. We got to have all the biggest names of history. Well, I mean, shoot, they're going to try to bring Stone Cold out of retirement. That's what they would try to do for this show. If it's going to be just a good show and make it a standalone pay-per-view, and you put on a good show of today's performers, not yesterday's performers, then sure, I'm fine. That's not what they're going to do.
I think this should just be one of the pay-per-views on a calendar. And it'd be great. Sure, it would probably be awesome.
With that. But it can't be all old school.
It would be awesome if tables, ladders, and chairs went from being in the Thunderdome, or essentially the SAP Center in San Jose, to being in Saudi Arabia. Because frankly, the TLC is not going to draw 50,000 people. But it has to be modern wrestlers.
It has to be the modern stars. It can't be yesteryear stars. And I have nothing against the yesteryear stars, but we don't. That's why the Saudi Arabia stuff just turns. It's like a turnoff for me. I don't want to watch it because I don't need to see Goldberg mess up a spot again.
Right now, when it comes to seeing fans in a 60,000 seat arena, I'll take it. So if that's their ambition to do this by the end of the year, I'm looking forward to it, because that means that they're essentially saying by the end of 2021, we're going to be back to normal. I imagine we have to be back to normal before they're going to go to Saudi Arabia. So what that's telling me is they plan to be back to normal before this year's out.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right.
We'll talk about that. Blood and Guts in 2 weeks on AEW is going to be a one-match show. We'll talk about that a little bit more next week, but that's planning on only being a one-match show, no other matches to go along with that.
Well, we'll get to that, because I got an interesting thought on that. I want to save that for next week.
Blood and Guts was originally supposed to happen in 2020, I think like March 25th, 2020.
It was supposed to be the Elite.
Yeah, well, yes, it was supposed to be different people, obviously.
Yes.
Over a year and about a month ago, this was supposed to happen in Newark, New Jersey at the Prudential Center. 1 week, I think, following their show in Rochester, New York.
We were
None of
supposed to be
those
there.
shows
Yes.
happened.
Of course not.
And they've moved it all the way. Can you believe that these shows were supposed to happen over a year ago? It's crazy to think. It's not just postponed. I mean, these are postponed years and years. I mean, there's some concerts this season that are postponing now till 2022. They were supposed to happen in 2020. We'll talk about all that next week. We'll talk about the CFL and the XFL. They're resuming talks. And one other thing that we'll finish out this week, but we'll talk about next week, is WWE on top of the A&E biography of Stone Cold Steve Austin. They debuted the Hidden Treasures show this week. And there's some talk within the WWE about why they want these hidden treasures. What are they going to do with these hidden treasures? Now, Vince McMahon, another person that we kind of look and go, will you just step aside and let Triple H take over for a change?
Yeah.
This is one of those things because Vince McMahon, had said before, and other people have heard him say this, Hall of Fames, brick and mortar museums, not his cup of tea. Obviously, that could obviously change if you watch this Hidden Treasure show because they're not just getting it for a TV show. They're getting it because they want it.
And here's the thing. If you are if you're an American Pickers fan, it's like American Pickers WWE style. That's how I look at it.
But the reason they want to get all this stuff, some of the stuff that they voluntarily gave away years ago that they're trying to get back is because they have bigger plans down the line.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that next week. We'll talk about Blood and Guts. We'll talk about maybe something happens on the road to WrestleMania Backlash that's worth talking about, and who's going to be the unified champion. We'll talk about that as well. So for Brandon, myself, Jared, this has been another edition of the Heel to Face podcast, and we will talk to you guys next week.